this meeting started. Hello
Mhm.
and welcome to everyone for our presentation on the 6 amendments that are going to be appearing on your November ballot. At least it's not 2018 when there were 12 amendments on the ballot. That would have taken us 2 or 3 hours. Of the 6 amendments on the ballot, reproductive freedom and marijuana are getting the most press. But there are other critical amendments on the ballot, including Amendment 1, making school board elections partisan, and Amendment 6, impacting public campaign financing. So there's a lot of really critical potential amendments to our Constitution, and I'm so pleased today to be able to have our experts, Barbara Ryder and Kathy McCachran, here to present what you need to know about the amendments. This Zoom is being recorded, and the recording is owned by the League of Women Voters and can only be used by us without any unless you have permission. So I'm turning it over now to Kathy.
Hello and welcome. I thank you for taking the time to meet with us about the 6 amendment proposals that are on the general election ballot. The League of Women Voters is nonpartisan but political. We were established in 1920, and we are nonpartisan because we do not support parties or candidates. However, we are political because we do take positions on policies. We keep this separate. The League has 2 missions: the educating the public, which we think is important because the electorate is an elected good governance, and advocating for positions on policies after careful study. We do keep these 2 functions separate. The amendments to the U.S. Constitution are at the end of the document, and they're numbered. In the Florida Constitution, the proposed amendments that are approved are embedded into the Constitution. Therefore, there will be changes either in the wording or replacement of the wording. The sources of amendment proposals that we are going to look at today are the legislature and the citizens' initiative. Proposals by the legislature require 3/5 approval of both chambers. The citizens' initiative requires signed petitions from the equivalent of 8% of the voters who participated in the last presidential election. In addition, the citizens' proposals are subject to review of the Florida Supreme Court regarding compliance with a single subject and rule and clarity, title, and summary. The first amendment that we are going to talk about is Amendment 1, the partisan school board elections. School board members in Florida are elected by the voters of the county, serve 4-year terms, and are paid. The school board controls the school properties. It establishes and organizes and operates the schools of the district. This is the text of the amendment. Take a moment to look at it. The local school board elections in Florida are currently nonpartisan. In 1998, the state mandated that the school board elections be nonpartisan. The nonpartisan election allows all registered voters to vote for the school board. Because Florida is a closed primary, in the event that it becomes partisan, the closed primary only allows voters registered with the political party that can vote. So that means about a third of the voters may be eliminated from participating in the school board elections. The yes vote, people that are supporters of Amendment 1 would say that it will increase candidate transparency. The no vote, the opponents of Amendment 1 say it will increase polarization and then not allow everyone to vote on the school board elections. These are the supporting organizations and the opposing organizations. The League of Women Voters is opposed to this partisan school board election amendment. Amendment 2, the right to fish and hunt. Currently, there is a statutory right to hunt and fish in the state. This is the text of the proposed amendment. The amendment would establish a constitutional right to hunt and fish in Florida as the preferred means of responsibly managing and controlling fish and wildlife. Supporters of Amendment 2 say the amendment provides and preserves the Floridians' right to hunt and fish for their means to provide to themselves and their families. Persons wishing to hunt and fish must still obtain a permit, and the Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission still has the authority to regulate hunting and fishing. The no opponents of Amendment 2 say the amendment could be used to override protections for the fish stocks, and that scientific methods may be more efficient for managing wildlife. These are the supporting organizations and the opposing organizations. The League has not taken a position in this amendment. Amendment 3, legalizing marijuana for adults 21 years and older. Medical marijuana was adopted by the Florida voters in 2016. This initiative would legalize recreational marijuana for adults 21 years and older. Amendment 3's financial impact primarily comes from sales tax collections. Possession of marijuana over 20 grams is still going to be a felony. Under 20 grams is going to be a misdemeanor. Not included in this amendment is permitting operation of any vehicle under the influence of marijuana. And it does not require health insurance providers to reimburse any person related to the medical use of marijuana. The yes vote is that the amendment does not forbid the Florida legislature from regulating the public use of marijuana. The legalization allows for control and regulation, ensuring that consumers have access to safer products. The opponents say that medical users need access and will get lost in the recreational marijuana profit motives. These are the supporting organizations and the opposing organizations. The League does not have a position on this amendment. Now, Barbara will start going over the amendments 4 through 6.
Thank you, Kathy. So Amendment 4 has gotten a lot of press. This is the amendment concerning the availability of abortion in the state of Florida. In June of 2022, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled on Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Healthcare Organization that there's no federal constitutional right to abortion, and they overturned Roe versus Wade, which had been the law of the land for about 50 years. The current law in Florida is a 6-week abortion ban. It offers exceptions for rape, human trafficking, and incest up to the first 15 weeks of pregnancy, but it also requires documentation, such as a police report or a restraining order. The controversial part, or one of the controversials in this this amendment, is over what specific examples of what conditions qualify for an abortion due to the health of the mother not being specified. The State Agency for Healthcare Administration contends that the law's exceptions are clear, but in many cases around the country, doctors who have performed abortions under situations where they felt the life of the mother or the health of the mother was in contention, in this law, violators would lose their medical licenses and face third-degree felony charges. So this is very serious. Next, please. This is the amendment, the way it's stated. We'll talk more about it. Kathy, can you give me the next slide, please? Thank you. So here's a summary of Amendment 4. Basically, the initiative would provide a constitutional right in Florida to abortion before fetal viability, or when necessary to protect the patient's health, as determined by the patient's healthcare provider. Now, viability is actually defined in Florida by a law, by a statute, and it means the stage of fetal development when the life of the fetus is sustainable outside the womb through standard medical measures. Often it's said that's at 24 weeks, but it's around 24 weeks. It's not a strict limit there. This initiative would not change the state legislature's authority to enact a law requiring that the parents of a minor be notified if their child requested an abortion, with exceptions that can be attained through a judicial waiver. Obviously, that's under unusual circumstances. Next slide, please. So what are the people who support Amendment 4 and are opponents of it? The supporters feel that all Floridians deserve the freedom to make personal health care medical decisions free of government intrusion. We know there's many reasons why women seek abortions: failed birth control, rape, incest, or carrying a pregnancy to term that would endanger their lives. Opponents of Amendment 4 say that the amendment doesn't require an actual medical doctor, an MD, to determine if an abortion is necessary to protect a woman's health, or if a fetus is viable, just any healthcare provider. Under Florida law, healthcare providers are not limited to doctors. This is true. But I want to warn you about some disinformation that's going around. People are saying that passage of this amendment would allow abortion right up to the moment of birth. This is not correct. Viability is well before the motion of birth, the point of birth. Next slide, please. These are the supporting organizations for this amendment. The Floridians Protecting Freedom is actually a consortium of many organizations, and you see that the League of Women Voters is actually supporting this amendment. Because this is an educational presentation, and as Kathy said earlier, we're not doing advocacy, we're going to leave it at that. Okay, next slide, please. Amendment 5 involves the annual homestead inflation adjustment. So this gets a little technical about how some people in Florida are eligible to have an exception, a homestead exception applied to their property taxes. So they are actually taxed at a lower than evaluated value of their property. In 2022, voters rejected a proposal which would have provided an additional homestead property tax exemption of $50,000 off the assessed value for certain employee groups like teachers and EMTs and law enforcement. This became very close, this amendment vote in 2022. Almost 59% of the people voted in favor, but it didn't quite make the 60%, which is required. Next slide, please. This is a statement of the amendment. And we're going to show you a place where you can see these statements later online, so we're not spending much time having you read them. Next slide, please. Basically, this amendment requires annual adjustments to part of the homestead exemption for inflation increases. The passage of Amendment 5 would lead to more savings for some property owners who apply for homestead tax exemptions, but it also might cost local government millions in lost taxes because of the increased exemptions. The inflation adjustment is only made if the consumer price index reported by the Federal Department of Labor is positive, meaning there was some inflation that year. No adjustment would be made if by January 1st, the consumer price index were negative or it stayed the same. And none of the exemption, nothing in this amendment or the exemption affects the parts of our property taxes that go to pay for public schools. Those are in a separate, kind of a separate bucket of our property taxes. Next slide, please. So what do the people who want this to happen say? You can see how the legislature voted, and this amendment was put up by the legislature in the manner that Kathy mentioned, requiring the 3/4 vote of each house. Sorry, let me just get together. Okay, I'm on the wrong page, just give me a second. Okay, so a yes vote means that some people will get more relief, and it might help seniors and persons who are of lower income to help them continue to live in their homes because of the lessening of their property tax, more savings for the property owners. A no vote, the opposition say that this could financially undercut the funding for local governments for improvements that help all of us who live here. And it might force more of the local tax burden on other property owners who don't get homestead exemptions. For example, people who own property that's rented do not get a homestead exemption for that property. Next slide. These are the organizations supporting and opposing this amendment. Just aside, the Florida League of Cities, I found out, is about 100 years old. It's an organization of cities, towns, and villages in Florida. So it's a long-standing historical organization here. The League hasn't taken a position on this amendment. Next slide. The next amendment is on public campaign financing. So public campaign financing in Florida is available for candidates for the offices of governor and elected cabinet members. This includes the Attorney General, the Chief Financial Officer of Florida, and the Commissioner of Agriculture. And there are parameters set up to qualify for these funds. You don't just get these funds under the law. You have to be not running unopposed, so you must have opposing candidates. You have to agree to certain expenditure limits in your campaign, and you have to agree to requirements for candidates that make you raise some of your own money for running your campaign. Just to give you an idea, the distribution of public campaign funds in 2022 included the following. Governor DeSantis received over $12 million. Chief Financial Officer Petronis received over $400,000, and Attorney General Moody received approximately $469,000. So this is definitely very useful for running a campaign. This slide shows you the history where we've gone back and forth in this state on this issue. In 1998, the voters adopted this idea of campaign financing provided under certain conditions by public funding. But in 2010, the legislature proposed to repeal this. And in 2010, only 52% of the voters voted to repeal, so that did not pass. Next slide. So the supporters of Amendment 4 say the voters should make the decision on whether state funds should be spent in helping candidates for office or on other things. And the opponents say that one political party in the state might have more money or outside funding or special interest groups who help to pay for campaigns. And maintaining the status quo helps to level the playing field for candidates. Without access to public funds, only the wealthy and the well-connected would be able to afford to run. Next slide, please. So these are the supporting organizations and the opposing organization. And on this amendment, the League of Women Voters opposes this amendment, meaning the League of Women Voters voting no on this amendment means we keep things the way they are. We continue with the public funding. That's the end of the amendments that we're going to talk of. And now we have a few slides to talk about the upcoming election and rules and regs about how you can vote. Next. Oh, there you go. So first I want to talk about vote411.org. This is a website that's run, that's created and run by the League of Women Voters of the US. And all of our local leagues around the United States feed information into this website. It has the capability for you to type in your name and address, and it will give back to you a sample ballot for the November election. And this is a very nonpartisan, truthful website where you can get information. Many of the local leagues will give questions to candidates for office in their area, the same questions to all the candidates running for the same office, and we print the replies, no editing, no cutting, and they're out there on Vote 111. So you can look at all the candidates at the same time, see the answers to relevant questions about issues in your area, and try to make up your mind. There are also the summaries that we've been talking about in more length on this website for each of these amendments in the election this year. And some local issues on the ballot are also sent up to Vote 411. So you can print out a sample ballot and actually think about how you're going to vote and fill it in for yourself and take it with you when you go to vote. Another important website that you should know about is sarasotavotes.gov. This is the Supervisor of Elections website for Sarasota County. And there's lots of very relevant, important information there, again, presented in a nonpartisan, truthful manner. Next. So in Florida, we vote in the general elections in 3 different ways. We can vote by mail, we can vote early, the polls are open early in certain places, or we can visit our precinct on election day and vote on November 5th. Okay, next slide. So the important things to remember about when you're voting in person. Election day, the polls are open in the precincts from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. As long as you're online by 7 p.m. in front of your precinct, you will be allowed in, even if it takes an extra half an hour, an extra hour to finish everyone who was online at 7 p.m. And you must remember that in order to vote in person, you have to have an ID with your picture and your signature. It can be 2 different IDs, one with a picture and one with a signature, but you must have those 2 pieces of information on you to show it at the voting place. And again, at the Supervisor of Elections website, you can find a list of things that you're allowed to use as IDs, for example. Another thing that people don't realize that sometimes your name is not on the voting list. You get inside, you try to tick in, their name is not on the list, but you are still allowed to vote with what they call a provisional ballot. And then after voting is finished on election day, the Supervisor of Elections will check those ballots, potentially contact you, and perhaps your vote will be counted. The last bullet on this slide is really important. This is something new. And the League of Women Voters is one of the organizations around the country. This is a national organization to try to prevent problems on election day from keeping people from voting. So it's a national, nonpartisan election protection organization, and it's a coalition. And when you call this number, if there is some problem at your voting site, you can get advice from a qualified lawyer who can try to help you and see if they can get something right there and then. The website of this organization, if you type in this number 866-R-VOTE, is hosted by Common Cause on their website. Next. So early voting is a kind of in-person voting. It's usually a week or 8 or 9 days long, and it occurs before November 5th. The early voting locations are different, not necessarily the same as your precincts. So you have to be careful. You have to look on sarasotavotes.gov to make sure you know where to go for early voting. And the times they're open are different. So this year, early voting is from Monday, October 21st to Sunday, November 3rd. October 21st to November 3rd. And all of the early voting locations are open from 8:30 in the morning till 6:30 at night. Now, if you're voting by mail and you want to physically drop off your ballot at the early voting locations, there will be drop boxes where you can deposit your ballot. Next. Okay, vote by mail. Due to recent legislation that was passed, you have to request a vote by mail ballot for every major election. That corresponds to every 2 years. And you can request the ballot online at sarasotavotes.gov or by filling out a paper request form. Now, the last day to make a request for the supervisor elections to mail you a vote by mail ballot is October 24th at 5 p.m. So you have to do it early. I would go ahead and do it now. You have to provide identification, obviously, when you sign up, and you can, at sarasotavotes.gov, you can check your registration status. You can make sure that you're signed up for vote by mail. And if you do vote by mail, after you deposit your ballot, say at a drop box, you can track it at sarasotavotes.gov. You can put in your name and address, and it will say, ballot received, mail-in ballot received. Or it could also say mail-in ballot counted for your mail-in ballot. So it's very reassuring when you vote by mail to have this. And we recommend in the league that if you're going to use the US Post Office to send in your mail-in ballot, you have to send it in no later than 2 weeks before the election date, because it's got to be, and that's the next slide here, which Kathy advanced. There are 2 ways that mail-in ballots, the most common way that they are discarded is because of these 2 mistakes. One is you forget to write your name on the back of the ballot. There's a place to put that. And you should include contact information, because if there's any problem with that ballot and you put down your phone number or you put down your email, then the supervisor election can get a hold of you. Otherwise, it's more difficult. And please, if you're sitting there with your spouse or sitting there with a friend and the 2 of you are filling out your mail-in ballots, each ballot goes in its own envelope. If you put 2 ballots in one envelope, they are voided. They're not counted. So each ballot comes with an envelope and goes back with an envelope. And it must get back into the hands of the supervisor of elections by 7 p.m. on election day. That doesn't mean it can be postmarked by 7 p.m. It means it has to be at the supervisor of elections site by 7 p.m. on election day. So you can mail it. If you do it early enough, you can drop it off at a drop box, or you can go to the supervisor of elections office on election day and drop it off. Now, there's one other change. If someone is going to drop your ballot off for you, we are now limited as to who can return our vote by mail ballots or drop them in a drop box. Only immediate family members, and that means your spouse, your parent, your child, your grandparent, your grandchild, or your sibling, or those of your spouse. So this is much more restricted than giving it to a neighbor, for example, which might have happened in the past. The only thing required by the voter to make the vote valid, though, is the signature. So if you choose not to put on your email or put on your phone number, you can do that. Next. Kath, I think it was the question slide. I think we went over it earlier. We weren't going to include this one.
So,
I think we're done. I think we're finished.
except so now we're going to open for questions.
Questions, yes. We're finished.
And so are we going to put those in the chat?
That was what was supposed to happen, yes.
Okay, so if you have any questions, put them in the chat. I do have 3 points. If you're from Manatee County, they do not have early voting on November 3rd, that Sunday. only Sarasota County does. On education, when you talk about having partisan primaries, if you're talking about a county like Sarasota County or Orange County, where Orlando is, very often whoever is elected in the primary for the dominant party. So since 1968, whoever has won the Republican primary for county commission has gone on to be the county commissioner. So if you make school board elections primary in counties that are leaning heavily to one party, Democrat or Republican, that means that basically a huge proportion of voters will not have a voice in that election because we're a closed primary state, not an open primary state. And I think we're only one of 14 states that has closed primaries. So basically it means that, 50% of the voters or less will determine who wins the election. So I think that's something that's critical for everyone to be aware of if you, depending on how you're leaning on that one. And medical providers, just so, so if you're a massage therapist, you can't do dry needling because that is not in what you are confirmed to be able to do. You can't do acupuncture unless you actually are certified to do acupuncture. And if you're certified to do acupuncture, you still can't do dry needling unless you're certified and have the credentials to do dry needling. So the only medical providers who can determine that a woman is in need of an abortion or perform an abortion have to have that as a criteria in their certification. And if they violate that, they lose their license. So I think that often people are like, oh, anyone can perform an abortion or suggest that a woman needs one. And that's not the case. It's only people who are, that's part of what their job criteria are. Okay, so questions? So why hasn't the league taken a position on all of the amendments? Is there any possibility that the league will do so on any of the remaining amendments before the election? So the league takes positions on issues. We do a lot of study and research and everything else to determine our positions on those issues. And it's a certain, it's a very limited scope of where we are, election reform. And so when things start to get out of our area where we're really focused and we take positions and we've done the studies in action and we've done the research, then we tend not to take a position on those. So that would be my answer there. Will this be on the website? So if you go to vote 411, even now, it has every single amendment, what the language is, a summary, what a vote yes would do, and what a vote no would do. Currently, the state league is working on their website, getting their positions and a full one-page, very informative page on each of the amendments and a summary page on the 6 amendments. So that's in process right now. But some of that content is also on Vote 411 and will be, this is recorded and we'll have this posted on YouTube as well. How do people living in facilities get their votes delivered if only family can deliver and they have none nearby? Kathy.
Kathy, you're muted.
What they will have to do is mail it in. You know, it's as simple as that, because there are so many restrictions as to who can deliver them. The other thing is, there is a way to get an affidavit signed that this person is allowed. So the easiest would be to mail. The second way is to have an affidavit signed and notarized that this person is allowed to deliver the voter's ballot.
So any other questions? And I'm sorry, at the beginning, I forgot to introduce myself because I was having a internet problem. I'm Sean Bartot. I'm president of the Sarasota League, and I was on the state board for 8 years before that. So sorry, I forgot to introduce myself. Any other questions? And the only thing I would say to everyone is please share with your neighbors, your family, and everyone that you connect with in your community that these amendments are very, very, very impactful in both positive and negative ways, and that every voter should be reviewing these amendments and reading all the details so that when they vote, they can be an informed voter. And because a lot of people just, you get to the polls and you're voting for a bunch of offices and president and everything else, but a lot of folks are not. If you move here from out of state, I'm in North Carolina right now, you can't have a citizens initiative to change the Constitution. And a lot of states don't allow the legislature to change the Constitution. So in Florida, it's unique that we have citizens initiatives, and a lot of folks, may not know that. But these are some, as you can tell, critical amendments for our future in Florida. And let's just make sure everybody's informed and everybody votes. And especially back in the day, it only took 50%, over 50% to get a citizens initiative passed, but then the legislature put a ballot on and got that changed with 50% of the vote to make it 60%. Wait, shouldn't they have required 60% to make it 60%? So now it takes 60%, and that's why we really need every voter to vote. What other voter education opportunities will the league present before the November election? Kathy?
September the 12th, what guardrails are in place for the November election? Ron Turner is going to be speaking at the Selby Library. September 19th, the school superintendent Connors will be at the Selby Library for a presentation. The one with Ron Turner is 5:30 to 6:30. Connors is 6 to 7 at Selby Library.
And Connor will be addressing the referendum for the school millage to get passed again. It actually got passed to take place starting in 2026, but then the legislature, it got passed in a March election, and the legislature changed the law and said that that had to get voted on again, in all things had to get elected in a general election. So even though everybody passed it, we got to vote on it again. It's significant funding for our public schools. So it's a critical referendum as well to be very knowledgeable about.
Okay, and then September the 23rd for Northport, the city commission candidate we're having a forum. So there's another September the 25th, we're having a charter review board election overview. All of these are on our website under events. Please go ahead and go into our website lwvsrq.org and review the events calendar, and you will see these additional educational opportunities.
The Charter Review Board is another powerful review board that has significant impact in Sarasota County, but it's really hard, to really know exactly what they do, how they do it, what the impact is. And, so I think that's going to be a very, very informative presentation, because we've got multiple seats on the Charter Review Board up for election in November. Oh, not long ago, the legislature wanted to raise the approval level from 60% to 2/3, but that did not get the 60% vote. Is the voter protection hotline for all of Florida?
I think it is. I think it is.
Yes.
Because this is a national consortium of organizations.
Yes. Okay.
I just wanted to remind everybody again about vote411.org, because there's an awful lot of information that we glossed over and spoke about very quickly, and they really have a good write-up on these amendments. I would urge you to urge yourself and your friends to look at them. And the other thing I would say is that the local paper has been running articles over the past couple of weeks, articles about several of the amendments. So you just might want to look at old issues and look for those. Different points of view, but everything you can read help.
And then shortly, the League of Women Voters Florida, lwvfl.org, they'll have a lot of great content. We'll be sharing that through social media and getting that message out as well, with the basic information on all of the amendments and critical information. Okay. Well, Kathy, turning it over to you.
Are there any other questions that are in the chat that?
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank everyone for attending this Zoom meeting. We're happy to be able to give all kinds of information. So thank you.
Thank you. Good night. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye. I'm going to end the meeting now.
Sounds good.